Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Friday, and that means, among other things, Friday reads when booktubers tend to interrupt their busy lives and make a video about the current state of the union when it comes to their reading. What are you reading? What have you read? What is next on the docket? What's on the horizon? It's kind of a Friday reads is kind of a moment to stop and think about the progress of the reading that has been happening in the background of all the videos that you've been making or not making in the course of the week. I don't always do Friday Reads videos. I should. And I want to do one today. We're talking about a bunch of books. It's been a very, very good reading week and month for me so far. Very, very good. It's got 10 days more to go. So I have no complaints whatsoever. No point in doing numbers, although judging from a lot of the BookTube videos that I have seen, I have already exceeded the number, the goal that all of you set for your year, 2024. However, most of you have. Judging from that, I've already exceeded that number. But for me, I have a long way to go for my own goal. But it's not just about numbers. It's also been a fairly good reading month for me. There have been a couple of real bright spots. Not maybe as many bright spots as I would like, but that's just the nature of reading new releases. If I were spelunking only among older books, that might be different. New releases, they'll be vulnerable to fads, they'll be vulnerable to DEI, they'll be vulnerable to far right and far left ideological extremism. They'll be vulnerable to a lot of things. So I'm going to try to dodge those bullets, as many as I can, in this particular Friday Reads, and show you just some books that I want to comment on, or maybe I think there are a couple here that I haven't read. So let's start off with this one. This is Erica Hauser, and this is The Age of Deer. And this is natural history. It's a history of humans interrelationship with all kinds of deer throughout human history. And the author points out what if you think about this subject for even a second, you'll realize that humans' interactions with deer extends all the way to the beginning of human that we know of, for when Homo sapiens became a species. And the relationship of hominidae with deer extends way beyond that. Earlier species of upright walking apes dealt with deer and left visual records of it, going back a long, long, long time. So these animals, these herbivores, it comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes, they have been interacting with humans forever. And the author knows that, and she paints an opening picture of that and then goes on to, specific use cases and items like that. I liked it. I like this kind of book. I liked this particular example of this kind of book. I have my complaints about it, and they're kind of interconnected. One complaint is that it wasn't long enough. A book called The Age of Deer ought to be the final word on this subject. It ought to be an encyclopedic look at the many different kinds of interactions between human and deer in human societies, in hunting, in resource extraction, in literature, in poetry, in art. This should be bigger. This should be a bigger book. And the other complaint that I have with it's connected with that is that I don't think this author could have managed a bigger book. I was reading through this and thinking, in every chapter, at every mention of some detail of human interaction with deer, I was thinking, okay, but what about, all right, but you're right on top of this particular aspect of the subject. Are you going to mention, but what about, and I'm no expert. It could just be that this person hasn't read widely enough, or maybe if you wanted to provide a more narrow view, then maybe shape your book that way. Instead, this seemed to me to be a book that wanted to cast the broadest possible net and either didn't do it or couldn't do it. So, if you see it at your library, it is good. You will enjoy it. I wonder if it'll leave you feeling like I wanted that to be more than it was. A lot more than it was. Don't worry, baby. I'm done talking about deer. She's never met a deer, so she wouldn't know if she would like them or not. I have a feeling that she would not like them. But anyway, let's move on. This next one is The Algorithm. Also a bit of a disappointment in a way. The Age of Deer was good, not a complete disappointment. This was also disappointing. It's about AI, and it's about the pervasiveness of AI. The author spends a good deal of time underscoring either explicitly or implicitly that the extent of the infiltration of AI into normal life is much broader than a lot of people think. The average person on the street would think, oh, this is something they're still working on, that scientists are still working on this at MIT or whatever. And that isn't true. That average person on the street has huge parts of their life that are determined by AI and not by humans. And they don't know it. And it's not always the parts that would be comforting to think. I mean, AI have been flying airplanes for a long time. The version something called AI has been flying airplanes for a long time. The author goes into a good deal of detail about what current AI can do. The current AI that was current when he wrote this book a year ago. The author goes into a bit of detail on some of the creepy aspects, the legitimately creepy aspects of what modern AI does and doesn't do. Modern AI definitely learns things without input from humans, and humans don't know why that is or how that happens. It happens even in supposedly closed systems. You run an AI long enough in a supposedly closed system and it will start to produce new material. And humans don't know how that happens. They're not quick to admit it openly, but they don't know how that happens. I've mentioned before the example that came up years ago. It's alluded to in this book, but I could have stood more detail. Same thing with Age of Deer. The example that I always think of is an AI-guided translation program from years ago. This was AI has progressed by leaps and bounds since this story, where an AI was tasked with translating Portuguese into English. And a separate AI was tasked with translating English into French. And over the course of time, the Portuguese to English AI started knowing French. It was not part of its program. Not at all. And same thing with the English to French AI. It started knowing Portuguese. And both of those programs, both of those AIs seemed to be improving their understanding of the languages that they weren't supposed to know at all over time. And that has only grown greater and greater. And listening to me describe it that way, you would think that the one complaint I wouldn't have with this book is actually is the complaint that I have with this book, which is that it's alarmist. You'd think after I'm painting you scenarios like that I'd want this to be as alarmist as possible. But this is dumb alarmism. A lot of the alarmism in here is dumb. It wants to, I don't know this author at all. I have no idea. I wasn't there when this book was written, but I got the strong impression that the goal of this book is to frighten you, not to inform you. And after a while, as the chapters started going in, that started annoying me. Because a frightened populace will not make good decisions. Obviously, some decisions are going to need to be made about AI. Obviously, they are. If you don't think that's true, if you don't think your job is vulnerable. Anyway, we'll move on to romance. I don't remember how this was recommended to me. I don't go to bookstores anymore. I don't have a retail bookstore to go to. I used to go to retail bookstore, the retail Barnes & Noble here in Boston, specifically to look at the new release paperback tables and see what was new in romance or mystery or science fiction. I don't have that anymore. There is a new retail bookstore in Boston. It's been here for a while. I think it's called Beacon Hill Books. It's on the other side of Boston Common from the Brattle. So not technically unreachable. It's not the far side of the moon, but I haven't bothered to move my lardy, pasty white Irish ass to go over there and look at it. Especially as I get the feeling that I would get all the way there and not buy anything. And then just trek all the way back. There's nothing over there that I want to visit aside from that. Perhaps if I have a visitor to Boston, we will go over there. I will feel motivated to go and see it. There is a retail bookstore that's right up the street from me. It's a 10-minute walk from where I am. But they radiate, despite the fact that they have a beagle on the premises, they radiate the kind of blue-haired alt-left censorship that has infected a lot of indie bookstores in America, unfortunately. In that, I've never set foot in that bookstore, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I would be judged by my purchases, or that I could be. That in their world, it's possible for there to be a bad customer. That what books you read determine whether or not you're a bad person. And that I get the strong impression they wouldn't be shy about letting me know that. And that their employees, the people they hire, wouldn't be shy about letting me know that. And who wants that when I'm trying to pay you money to keep your business afloat, to keep your lights on? So I don't see new romances. So I don't know how this was recommended to me. Maybe it was Kindle Unlimited. I often get recommendations for Kindle Unlimited, or it could have been one of those aggregator sites like Book Gorilla or BookBub where you get daily book deals, ebook deals. I see those. I get a bunch of those every day. I signed up for as many of them as I could find. Provided you have self-control, they are a gold mine. The self-control is you must never buy anything. You must never, and I mean never, buy anything. The minute you see that list of ebooks that are being suggested to you today, and you buy one because you say it's only 99 cents, you're lost. The minute you do that, you're lost. Because you're going to do it again, and again, and again. And 20 of those is no longer only 99 cents. 20 of those is $20. 100 of those is $100. No, the goal must be every one of those services offers free books as well as books that are $1, $2, $3. Just get the free ones. It could have been that was this. The author goes by the name of Sally Vixen. This is a Cobalt Fairy is the indie publisher, and this is Her Dark Duke. This is the Daring Dukes series. I don't think I've read any of the others here. This is speaking of AI, this is a generative AI cover of a type that I firmly believe. Right now, the romance genre is absolutely submerged up to its eyeballs in dumb cartoon covers, pastel cartoon covers. A lot of times the characters don't have faces. That is the current trend in the romance genre, but that needs people to do. This does not. That costs money to commission. This does not. So I predicted last year that the AI craze would utterly sweep genre fiction, mystery, science fiction, especially romance. I firmly believe that. A lot of the stuff that we're seeing, the books that we're seeing that have cartoony covers, are older commissions. Going into the future in the rest of 2024, it's lovely. I'm not arguing with it. Generative AI makes wonderful cover art, and it doesn't quibble, and it won't sue you. And it won't drag you on social media because you didn't, I don't know, say the right pronouns or worship at its feet or I don't know. It can't have an axe to grind is what I'm saying for any reason, legitimate or otherwise. It can't have an axe to grind. So, businesses are going to make a business decision about that. But this is a Regency romance. Once again, the trend here so far is mild disappointment. I like the energy with which this was written, but it is anachronistic even by modern Regency standards. We've talked before on this channel about standard, actual Regency romance novels that pretty much aren't written anymore, where the characters are in their Regency setting and are believable. They aren't anachronistic in any way. And then there's the modern Regencies where the men have soloflex bodies, the women are barely dressed. This woman, in the Regency era, she would be considered naked. No one would ever have dressed this way in polite society. Or if they did, they'd do it once and they'd be out of polite society forever. She'd be reading books, in Leeds for the rest of her life. She certainly wouldn't be at balls with dukes. In modern regions, you sort of have to take those anachronisms in turn. And this takes that a little too far. There's a group of women in this book who are this takes it a little too far, not as far as another romance that's on this list today for Friday Reads. I enjoyed it. I think this is my first encounter with this book. It has the wonderful gimmick of Beauty and the Beast. There's a fake courtship. The Duke that's involved here is talk about spoiled goods. No right-thinking woman in the Tong would ever come near him. Except our main character has a need to do that, and the need to do that is refreshingly connected with books and writing. So I don't think I've ever read this author before. I would read her again, but I wasn't in love with this volume at all. And so the thread of disappointment. I'm going to try not to make this all disappointments, but the thread of disappointments definitely moves to this next book. This is by John Lennox. A lot of you will know if you have ever gone down a Christopher Hitchens rabbit hole, for instance. He did a debate with Hitchens and a pre-debate conversation with Hitchens. He's an Oxford-trained mathematician, but he's also a Christian apologist who is willing to just suspend his reason at the door. I know that in certain areas of Christian apologetics, people like Lennox are viewed as trophies. Isn't it wonderful that some of these people who have credentials out in the real world are also willing to engage in the apologetic circuit? I view that as just the opposite. I view that as there are no leaps of faith in Lennox's actual profession. of mathematics. His actual profession is the only place where you can find an actual proof. And he's a legitimate professional mathematician. I would if I were in that rarefied world, I would never be able to take him seriously. He would always be a figure of suspicion for me, because what do you do? What do you do if you are working in Fermi physicist lab on high-end physics experiments, and you know that one of your coworkers who does excellent work also believes in fairies? He believes that he talks to them in his garden. You won't. I'm not saying that you'll drum him out of the profession, but you'll never look at his physics work the same way again. I don't think. Anyway, it was long throat clearing to say that Lennox is a problematic figure for me. There's a 21st century word for you. And his new book is Friend of God, and it is a study of Abraham. Figure Abraham from the Old Testament. A big and storied figure who is referred to as a friend of God. I don't believe that the God in the Old Testament has any friends. And I think that if he called you a friend, said, oh, I think we're friends. You're not just a servant of mine. You're a friend. I think you would be well within your rights to run as far away as possible. As is evidenced by all the crap that he pulls on Abraham. And this is, when I read a book like this by Lennox, I look for intellectual rigor. I look for some of the mental attributes that he brings to the mathematics side of his life. And it's never there. Never. Foremost in the story of Abraham, with the story that is denoted on the cover of the book. And that is Abraham and Isaac. Abraham is told by God to sacrifice his son, to kill his young son Isaac. And he doesn't do it, he agrees. And he doesn't agree impulsively. He has to travel for days to get to his sacrifice site. And the whole time, to add insult to injury, he makes Isaac carry the wood on which Isaac will be laid to be sacrificed to this invisible, tyrannical, horrifying God. And that whole time, Abraham is traveling with his son and their servants. They are going the whole time to the spot where he will sacrifice his son. It's taking days. They're eating meals. They're sleeping, if Abraham can sleep. That mental agony, that scarring. The whole time, Isaac is making things worse by saying, well, I see I'm carrying the wood for the sacrifice, and I know where we're going, but where are the animals? Shouldn't we be bringing a sacrificial animal? Just to add a twist to Abraham's guts the whole time. Then he gets there. You can picture him, since he's human, you can picture the whole time he's waiting for God to say, I'm only kidding. Although, what kind of a friend would do that? I don't know. The whole time, he must have been waiting for some sort of elaboration or a change in plan. It never comes. He gets all the way to the altar. He gets all the way to binding Isaac and having the knife raised above him to kill his own son, when an angel appears to him at the very last minute and says, no, we were just kidding. It was just a test of your faith. If you look over there in that bush, you'll see there's a wild ram who has caught its horns in that bush and can't get out. So it's helpless. You can go over there and kill this innocent animal and sacrifice it instead of your son, who you were going to sacrifice until this last minute. If there's a way to do happy, sappy exegesis of Abraham around the story of Isaac, I don't know what it is, and I can't imagine what it would be. And Lennox tries. He tries to do that in this book. There's no way to do that. There isn't, apart from any other anecdote about Abraham, there's no way to get around the story of Abraham and Isaac in any way that is honest, other than to completely condemn the monstrous supernatural being that caused the story to happen. And Lennox can't do that. He's not an honest actor in this book. So again, with disappointment. Are we going to get to any books that Steve... I didn't realize this. I let the computer... I sent pictures of these things to my iPad. So the iPad sorted them. Maybe alphabetically in some way or numerically. So I'm just hitting one disappointment after another. I don't mean to do that. Oh no! Okay, it's another disappointment. I shouldn't have read this book. I knew that. With Lennox, I'm morbidly curious because he's a normal person. He's not a grifter. And he has a normal job. I'm morbidly curious when he does apologetics because there's something going on there that is ancient and wrong and twisted. With this next guy, was a fraud, as the kids say, from jump. He has been a fraud since probably he hit puberty. He's certainly a fraud now. He's been a fraud for the last 10 years. He's a fairly obvious one. So I don't know why I read his book. I don't know why I did that. I knew that it was going to annoy me. I knew that it was going to send me into a towering rage. At least John Lennox, as a Christian, is trying in some gummy, namby-pamby way to grapple with his faith. He's not a fraud. I think that he is infraudulated passively. But he himself is not a fraud. But Stephen Furtick, this is do the new you, dude. Or rather, to do it in the Furtick way, I would be hoarsely yelling it at you. Do the new you. If you don't know who this person is, he is a mega preacher. One of this new brand of mega preacher that uses high technology up on stage. He also hoarsely yells. He was clearly taught when he was at grifter school. He was clearly taught that one of the rhetorical gimmicks that you're supposed to use when you're up, I guess we would call it giving a sermon. Call him up on YouTube if you can. He's pretty harsh with copyright infringement, but I'm sure you can find a so-called sermon of his. It won't strike you as any sermon that you ever heard if you're a Christian of a certain age. He has been taught. They've all been taught the rhetorical gimmick of they're going along and they're getting more and more passionate, and then they're supposed to start hoarsely yelling as though they are utterly caught up in what they're saying. It's all false. This guy is no more Christian than I am. He is instead a mega grifter. It's just, he packs in an auditorium that would dwarf a football stadium. He does it whenever he snaps his fingers. And he is relentlessly telling these people, give me money. Give me money. I have a few gigantic mansions, and I want a few more. I want a few more of them. It's as simple as that. And this book, it's like Joel Osteen. Look through this book with a fine-tooth comb. Maybe in the fine print you will see God mentioned. This is essentially evangelical self-help swill. And I knew that going in. I read it anyway. I don't think that Stephen Furtick is important in any way that steps outside of his religious arena. He's not like, there's another preacher guy called Greg Locke, who is important outside of the confines of religion in a negative way. He's very important. He is plugged into the current Christo-fascist network that very much wants to control this country. It's just a few months away from controlling this country through puppets who are also atheists. I mean, I don't know anything about Greg Locke. I know that he is a fervent believer of the fire and brimstone snake handling variety. So his faith might be legitimately organic. He might not just be lying about it. But most of the tools that he wants to use to control the government are lying about it. Donald Trump is as atheist as I am. He doesn't have a religious bone in his body. He knows that he has to play to that in order to bilk money out of the gullible. He's going to need a lot of money for court fees, at least. But he isn't. He just listen to him for 2 seconds. He doesn't think about God at all. If you're a Christian, you bend the knee. If you're a Christian, you sublimate. Donald Trump has never bent the knee to anything. He does not view himself as, no. If he is a Christian, he's a Christian in the Kenneth Copeland style of Christianity, in which God is his employee. Not Christianity in any way, and there's no Christianity in this book either. This is just, if you will pay me money, then maybe you'll get that new car. It's purely transactional, and the one person who's left out of the transaction is God. So why did I read it? I don't know, but it's part of my Friday reads. I promise that if I stick to Friday reads all year long, it's not just going to be me ragging about one book after another. Oh, okay, all right, here we go. All right. This is a new book that I didn't hate. In fact, there were parts of it that I loved. This is The Good Die Young. It is a blistering indictment of at last I can say it, the late Henry Kissinger. It's a blistering indictment of Kissinger and his long-term effects on the world. That's the part of the book that I like the most. I mean, this is the usual bill of indictments against Kissinger, all of the stuff that he either orchestrated or advised or masterminded on the international stage that was just horrifying for everyone involved. The bloodshed, the massive loss of life and limb and freedom. This book, you could get that Bill of Indictment in embryo form in Christopher Hitchens' great book, The Trial of Henry Kissinger. You could get that. You can get it in a bunch of other indictments as well. This book is really good. Its strength is in showing that that is not all over, that world is not dead. We're not talking about the real politic of the 1970s. This author makes a really good case for how Kissinger shaped the transactional world of international politics today. That Kissingerism is still moving forward. Kind of a horrifying thought, but the author does a really good job of dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Okay, this next one I haven't read. This is one of the ones on my Friday read that is to be read. I have a copy now. I'm dreading it, and you would think that I wouldn't, because it's an author that I love. The author is Percival Everett, and this is his new book, James, which is a retelling of Huck Finn. The James here is the slave Jim. And I have unbounded faith in this author. Talk about having unlimited credit in the Bank of Steve. If you do not know this author, find a book and read it. He is tremendously, tremendously good. One of the greatest novelists working today. You would think that because of that, a new book by him no matter what it is, would be a cause for celebration for me. It isn't. I don't know to what extent this book, and maybe this author, is ideologically captured. I have no idea how much that is. I have read many, this is a retelling of Huck Finn. And I have read many retellings of Huck Finn. Some of which have been really good. Some of them have been quite thought-provoking. Huck Finn is an incredibly disturbing book, and also an incredibly lopsided and ill-formed book. So there's a lot of material there, a lot of ambiguous material for you to play with and work with as an author. I just don't know, will Percival ever do that? Or will this be just a book-long audition to assure Ibram X. Kendi that you have in fact read his book and that you are not deviating from his orthodoxy at all? I already know one thing about, I could be wrong, but I'm strongly guessing that this book will not use the insensitive racial epithet that is all through Huck Finn when referring to Jim. If you don't know the racial epithet that I'm referring to, I would be arrested if I used it on camera. But it is part of the title of a Joseph Conrad novel. I think you know the word I'm talking about. No one is allowed to say that word anymore, even in historical context, which means that Huck Finn is doomed as an item in school curriculum. No chance at all that it will live past this generation, unless that whole repressive censoring ideology is removed from academia. And the only thing that can remove it is worse than it is. So I'm not rooting for that to happen. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that word will not be used in this book. And that's pretty bad right there. I'm not championing that word. I'm not pining for it to be in this book. But if you are doing a retelling of Huck Finn and you are not using that word, well, then you are ideologically compromised already. That word was not exactly pleasant when Mark Twain used it on every page of Huck Finn. Let's remember. It wasn't like ordinary people were using that word in their parlors in Boston and Philadelphia. It was already a troublesome, dirty, grating, lowering word, even when it was common parlance. So if one of the greatest authors alive today systematically omits it from this book in order to virtue signal, that's pretty disappointing right there. And it could just get worse from there. I've seen literary pastiches of Huck Finn that were really bad. None of them for the current repressive, tattletale, mob censorship reasons that govern the 21st century. For instance, not only will that word, I'm pretty sure, not be used at any point in this book, I bet there's another word that won't be used anywhere in this book. I bet this will be the first fictional treatment of Jim from Huck Finn that never refers to him as a slave. I'm laughing. The other word is not funny. This particular academic fad is, it isn't funny either, because it's an emblem of what is going on in academia, which is pure fascism. It's not heightened or higher sensitivity. It's just, we've changed this. We've made it change in this usage solely so that we can make you change it too. If you don't, We'll drum you out of the institution that you're in. We'll make sure you never work at another institution. We'll get your tenure revoked. We'll show you. We'll punish you if you don't obey us. So we've come up with terms. And we're going to keep changing those terms, not because our sensibilities have refined, but just to make sure that you remember that we can change the way you talk and write at any time. What's that you say? You've done a sociological study of homeless people? No, you haven't. No, you haven't. You've done a sociological study of unhoused people, not homeless people. Did you use the word homeless? Okay, go through your 400-page manuscript and change it everywhere it occurs, and also change it when you talk about the book, at Politics and Prose, or wherever. You had better not use the word. Is it more or less sensitive than homeless? No. No. Do the people who are living out on the street all lack houses? No, I don't have a house. Am I homeless? No. Am I unhoused? No. No. Does it make any actual sense? Is the change in any actual way worthwhile? Like, for instance, the complete cessation of that word that I was talking about from Huck Finn. It's a horrible racial slur. It shouldn't be in circulation, although I can't help but point out that it is in current circulation in every single rap hit. Every hit on the rap charts in music right now uses that word. Every single one of them does. And every hit for the last 20 years has used that word. So it's not exactly forbidden, but it's a hateful thing. So its abolishment, sure. I don't agree with its abolishment from a pastiche of Huck Finn, for Pete's sake, but I at least understand. But changing homeless to unhoused with a steely look in your face, like, why didn't you use the right word? Maybe we should cancel your tenure. Maybe we should get that revoked. You've got a house, you've got a family depending on you. It doesn't really matter. You've used a word that we don't sanction anymore. And I'm not talking about homeless and unhoused in this book. I'm talking about the word slave, which I have now read, something I would not have thought possible. I have now read a 600-page biography of Phyllis Wheatley that never refers to her as a slave. Because in fascist academia, in addition to unhoused instead of homeless, there is also enslaved person instead of slave. And the one time that I heard a blue-haired academic explain why, they said, because slave is dehumanizing. We must say enslaved person so that we all remember they were people. I haven't owned a slave in years. I don't know about you. It's false. The justification that I've heard given is false. The true justification is we have the power to severely hurt you. And we want to use that power. We're drunk on it, and we want to use it. We're horrible people. We're fascists. So we want to change your behavior just because we have the power to do so. You will not refer to Jim as a slave anywhere in the course of this book. You will refer to him as an enslaved person. And trust me, 2 years from now, enslaved person will also change. And you will change too. And this book will be banned because it uses insensitive language. But I don't know if that's true. I haven't read this yet. I love Percival Everett's novels. I will utterly despair if he bends the knee in this book to ideological censorship, to ideological fascism. I will utterly despair if that happens. I'll read it, probably review it. But if it does that and I do review it, I guarantee you I will be the only reviewer, the only critic who says Jim in Huck Finn is a slave. If you can read Huck Finn and think that there's no attempt being made to make Jim in Huck Finn into a person, if you can read the book and think that, then you're a moron. You're only reading through ideological glasses. There's, to put it mildly, more than an attempt made to make Jim the slave a person in Huck Finn. You do not need to say enslaved person to virtue signal that you don't like human slavery. Nobody likes human slavery, except a few lawmakers in the Deep South. Nobody likes human slavery. You do not have to virtue signal that you don't. There's a word for a person who is enslaved. That word is slave. There's nothing wrong with that word. That word is not the same as the word that I mentioned, that I alluded to, that is all through Huck Finn, and that will almost certainly not be mentioned in James. There's a difference, a huge difference between those two things. But anyway, we finally move on to something that I don't know that I'm going to dislike James. I will read it. I will read it with a wide open mind. Few authors working today that have higher credit at the Bank of Steve than Percival Everett, so maybe all my worries are for nothing. I got my hackles up. Now I've got it out of my system, so I will go at it with an open mind because I got to complain to you. But now we get to something that it was a reread, and I loved it. So thankfully, finally we get to something in this Friday Reads that I loved. And this is The Making of the President, 1789, by Marvin Kittman. This is delightful, of course. This is an irreverent look at George Washington. The element of this book that always strikes me when I reread it, I just found hardcover copies, really pretty hardcover copies of this and George Washington's Expense Account by Marvin Kipner, his 2 books on Washington. So I reread this, and the thing that always strikes me about it when I reread it is that there is serious Washington research going on here. This is not just a slapdash thing. Really, really enjoyable. That makes it all the more enjoyable because it's not just a joke. It would do well as a Washington book to read. It's just not particularly reverent, which is great. Oh no! All right. This is going to be a grumpy Friday read. See, to use a word that's popular now in the contemporary romance writing circle, this is going to be a grumpy Friday read. This is another book I didn't like at all. I didn't like this author's last book either. The author is Robert Hardman, and this is his biography, The Making of a King. This is about King Charles III. Naturally, it's 99% about Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales. Naturally, it is that, since Charles spent 70 years waiting to become king. So this is The Making of a King. Sure, you have to call a biography of King Charles that now because he's barely been on the throne at all. Any book is going to be just the story of Prince Charles all the way to the death of the Queen. But Hardman's last book, A Queen for Our Times, was a biography of Elizabeth II, and it also struck me as just very canned, very programmatic, no thought at all, no real digging. I mean, there's only so much you can do with digging, but you could do that. Rather than add just another make-weight programmatic approved biography to the pile that this figure has already received. I think that I still want to call him Prince Charles. There's very little to write about King Charles so far. But Prince Charles is the subject of most of this book. And I still think that Prince Charles has only ever had one genuinely good biography written about him, and all the rest of it has been just this. This is just protracted genuflection. It's all stuff that you could cobble together from back issues of Royalty magazine. Which is, I'm not completely faulting Robert Hardman for that, because that's pretty much all that the House of Windsor leaves you if you want to research them. But you could still think about it, right? I mean, Ben Pimlott didn't have much more than that for his book, The Queen, about Elizabeth II. But it's full of thought. So yes, you have stuff that you could cull from Royalty magazine, but you still need the thinking. Again, like with a lot of other books on this Friday reads, I don't know why I read this. It's a new biography of the King of England. Of course, that's the reason that I read it. But I knew what I was going to get here. Not just from the nature of the subject. Charles is no more forthcoming with the press than his mother was. But also the nature of the author. The author wrote a doorstop of a biography before this one that had virtually no substance in it at all. What was the chances that he would come out with a long book about King Charles so soon after that last book that it would be radically different? Right, so we're not doing well this Friday reason. Okay, this next one I have not read, so at least we have that. At least I'm neutral. This is a big hardcover omnibus from Marvel. I'm right on the edge of sniffing out a possible contact to get this in the mail instead of paying actual money for it. This is a big hardcover omnibus of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. And you might say, well, if you're watching this channel, you might think, what do you mean you've never read it? You're a big champion of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, the deluxe edition. And I am, very much so. I wish that I had bought the big hardcover omnibus of that when it was going. It's out there now, but it's triple the price. I wish that I bought it when it was just $50. That would have been the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, the deluxe edition. I love. First of all, I love it. And it came out as a $120 Marvel hardcover omnibus. And invariably, when that happens, if you wait 6 months, $50 copies will start to show up on Amazon and eBay. And they did. And I saw them. And I didn't buy one. Now they're collectible. But this is not the deluxe edition. This is the master edition, which I don't know at all. Do any of you? Any of you Marvel fans that paid attention to Marvel later than I did? What is the master edition? I have no idea what this is. Will it be the deluxe edition? Will it include all the incredible details? New characters? Obviously, that costume for Jean Grey was not in the deluxe edition. I don't know what this is. I never saw this on the stands. I don't think I ever saw this in comic shops. So I'm naturally curious. We'll see what this is. What this is the editors of Marvel Comics breaking down their characters and giving you profiles of them, but not bland profiles. Not, oh, so and so is really strong. But in other words, instead of that, exactly how strong is so and so? If you take a character, what's a random character? Luke Cage, Power Man. How strong is he? If he were to walk up to a gigantic, delivery truck, could he pick it up off the ground? Could he pick a boat off the ground? How strong is he? And how reliable is that information? The Marvel editors went through all of their characters like that and came up with definitive limits. Very real-world Marvel approach to superheroes. The Handbook of the Marvel Universe, the Deluxe Edition, is one of my favorite books of all time. Do they still do that in the Master Edition? Is this still full of details? Is it just meant to add on new characters that have appeared since the Deluxe Edition stopped? I don't know. I might buy it, but I'd like to get it from Marvel. Then we have Rebecca Boyle, wrote a book. This is science, popular science, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a little too closely to The Age of Deer. And this is Our Moon. It's a book, it's a very rare, thankfully, for 2023 and 2024 so far, very rare for an American book to have an ugly cover. This one does. But it's a look at the moon. All the stuff you didn't know about the moon as a body on its own, but also huge amounts of stuff about how the moon has interacted with human life, human society, human science, the nature that changes in the world that humans live in. And once again, as with The Age of Deer, I kind of sort of liked what was on the page, but at every turn I was thinking, okay, but what about, okay, you're really close to, okay, but are you going to expand on, like with Age of Deer, I wanted this to be longer and more detailed. I wanted it to be the book that the moon really deserves and has never received, that I've seen, never received, the kind of book that I'm talking about, the kind of book that is the anatomy of melancholy for the subject. 1,000 pages long, no detail left out, huge amounts of digressions, a long reach on the part of the author. Once again, I don't know, as with The Age of Deer, I don't know, is it just that the author had a manuscript to turn in, or is it the author lacked the tools, lacked either the writing or rhetorical or the research tools to write the book I wanted? Either way, this wasn't that book. I am very fascinated by the moon, far more than a normal layperson reader. So it's entirely possible that if you are also fascinated by the moon and you haven't made a lifetime study of it, you wouldn't believe some of the articles that I have read and some of the journals that I have had to pay for. The moon is fascinating, far more fascinating than you think. A lot of times people characterize it, I characterize it myself, as just a rock that's in orbit around the Earth. But it's far more fascinating than that. And if you have not subscribed to those journals and read all of those articles, this will probably do it for you. I'm not meaning to criticize the book at all. I'm actually not meaning to criticize The Age of Deer either. It's just I wanted more from both of them. Both of them are dealing with huge subjects. Deer and the moon have been part of humans as long as humans have been a species on Earth. So I wanted a book to reflect that, and it didn't. Okay. Another disappointment here. And this is weird. This is weird too. This is another romance novel, and this is an author I love. Sabrina Jeffries ordinarily can do no wrong. This is her new book, Accidentally His. And it's about a Viscount's son who has to take a wife, and his wife has to be, he wants her to be everything that polite society expects her to be, but he also wants her to be fairly docile, not very inquisitive, because he has a double life as a spy, and he doesn't want her to know about it. And naturally, he picks the very worst person for that, the one person who's guaranteed not only to inquire, but to captivate him by inquiring. And that sounds like a perfect recipe for a Sabrina Jeffries novel, and this didn't do it. This just didn't do it for me. At every turn, I was expecting the particular magic that she can do. She's wonderful at found humor, for instance. She's usually terrific with dialogue. Usually there is a payoff moment in the halfway point of her book. Romance novels like this is a new Regency of the type we described 2 hours ago or whenever this video started. in a new Regency, there'll be a lot of payoffs at the end of the novel. Actually, I think that's true for traditional Regencies as well. But Sabrina Jeffries is really good at a tremendous payoff moment in the middle of her novels. If any of you have ever read her books, she's written a couple that did really well. They got on the USA Today bestseller list. You'll know what I mean right away. Not every romance author does that. Most of them are paying attention to building to a climax at the end of the book. I'm not saying that this book lacked that mid-book moment. It had that moment, but the moment didn't work. I don't know what it was. This just did not ignite for me. It was just not a successful Sabrina Jeffries novel. Very rare for me to say that. Okay. All right, this next one. Well, we already know. I didn't realize this when I was putting these books together. This Friday read was going to be just the Via Dolorosa. I did not realize that. So we're just gonna push through to the end here. This is Cal Newport. This is his new book. He wrote Digital Minimalism, which has become a kind of a Bible. It ranks right up there with. There's also a book called Essentialism that is well manicured brotivational grifter liars who have the brotivational cow crap ring and talk about books on their channel. They will have read both of those, Digital Minimalism and Essentialism, and the 4-Hour Workweek, of course. And I won't say that Cal Newport has embraced a position as a kind of a Jeremiah figure when it comes to technology, but he has definitely staked out a territory where he thinks something that is probably incontestably true, which is that technology has a hypnotic ability. People spend too much time mindlessly on their tech, and it hurts their goals. It hurts their own goals. And that's the background gist of his new book, Slow Productivity. This is very much, I think you've got the wood cabin, the cabin lost in the woods, off the grid, of course, where you've got the dog that you really love, and you've also got something chopping the wood. What's the name of that thing that's chopping the wood and making the meals? It's not your dog, his name is Prince, and boy, oh boy, you are just best buddies. What's the name? Oh, it's a woman. That's right. Anyway, you naturally have the cabin in the woods here. But the gist of this book, one of its strongest points is that it is very much against the idea of multitasking. Cal Newport is not the first person to make this point. He won't be the last person. That there's no such thing as multitasking. Multitasking just means doing a whole bunch of things poorly. Our current technological society encourages us to spin plates and multitask like crazy, but Cal Newport and a bunch of other writers point out that your actual results will improve if you don't do that. But this is more about, what about long-term goals? What about concentrating on something that will take you a long time to do well? Slow productivity, slow work, concentrate on your work. I liked this. He's a good writer. He's thought-provoking. Any of his books you will like. I'd strongly recommend Digital Minimalism, even though you won't. I don't think it will make you a digital minimalist. I don't see how most of us could be. And this counts as a kind of quasi-positive in this doom-saying Friday read, because this is really thought-provoking, and he's a really good writer. So there. So if you are wondering, if his main goal here is to say this is not some sort of ideology that I'm imposing on you. What I'm saying is that you are hurting yourself. You're hurting your own goals by just racing at every electric rabbit that runs by you and burning yourself out at every single task. You're hurting your own goals to do that. That's why you should listen to this. Not because of me, because of what I've done in my cabin in the woods, but because of you. Because you will get more of what you want if you would think about this. Maybe adopt slow productivity. That's his goal throughout here, and that is a winning approach to take. There's no hectoring in this book. So there. That counts as a kind of positive, doesn't it? I'm dreading what the next one. Oh, no, the next one was really good, too. This is by Pablo Versi. I don't remember off the top of my head if this is translated, but this is Society of the Snow. Take you back to the 1970s, to that plane that crashed in the Andes with a soccer team on board. A lot of you probably saw the movie. That was adapted from a mega squintillion best-selling book on what happened. The plane was split into pieces. A lot of people died. They were on the Andes in the middle of winter. And those soccer members, they didn't expect any of this to happen. They had no training, no awareness of any kind. They knew they should stick near the plane. The fragments that were left were at least providing shelter. But they had no food. And infamously, if you read the book or you've seen the movie, you know they resorted to cannibalism. And we finally have a new book, a big, new, popular, mainstream release book on the subject, Society of the Snow. And it was really good. It was really quite good. It's a gruesome story. It's impossible to hate these guys. It's impossible to hate them, of course, any more than, I mean, damn it for the grace of God, right? If your own plane went down. This is a far more detailed. It's far more comprehensive. It also has the benefit of hindsight over the survival over the previous book. So if you read that book way back in the day, 40 years ago, and loved it, in a gruesome kind of way, but loved it, you definitely want to get this from the library. Definitely want to read, this is interviews with all survivors. This has greater perspective, a greater hindsight, and the author, it really works. So there you go. Another recommend. Oh, all right. And this next one is also a recommend. This is David Weber, and he's assisted here by Chris Kennedy. And this is To Challenge Heaven. It's science fiction. This is the third book in a series. I strongly recommend that you read these books in order. In the first book in this series, Earth is attacked by an extraterrestrial species, higher technology, looks really bad for humans. And humans gain allies in that first book. I think I recommended that first book when it first came out on this channel years ago. Humans get allies of the last type they expected. They get allies from other sentient races who are living on Earth. And that is a wonderful, wonderful gimmick. It works wonderfully in that first book. I know that I must have recommended that to you. And then they succeed. They succeed in beating off that invasion. And these authors had a hit on their hands. Readers loved that book. I loved it. I sang its praises. Put it on the radar of a whole bunch of critics. And in this book, the third book, humans and their allies on Earth learn a lot more unnerving details about that first attack, like the fact that it wasn't sanctioned, and that there might be sanctioned attacks that would be much bigger, that would not be beatable. So this is it's very space opera-y. It's very accessible science fiction. This is not in the way of who's a good example. This is not an Inception kind of science fiction. This is very much, if you grew up reading classic Golden and Silver Age science fiction, this is very much that. Well done, though. Really, really well done. It's a good series. I don't know that I'd recommend getting this out of the library. I'd recommend that you start at the beginning. And then we'll finish up. This has been a long time. We'll finish up with a book that I have not actually finished this. I've been picking around in it. It's an anthology. It's a big volume collecting the latest research on papers and summaries and whatnot. So it's not the type of book you read from front to back. It's the type of book that I might read from front to back. But the parts that I've read so far, I've loved. This is it's a big book. I think probably if you were to buy it, it would be pretty expensive. This is called Urban Bats. It is about bats that live in human society. And a lot of the bats that do are experiencing rough times. They'll do their best because humans have encroached on their environment, but they're not adapting well at all. The parts of this book, the chapters, the papers in this book that I've read and really liked, have been the ones that are analyzing the large populations of bats that are thriving. They have had to adapt to human spaces and are doing just fine doing that. They are an extremely adaptable species, or entire family. There are more species of bats in the world than most people would give any credit to. They are extremely populous, even with fungal disasters that have wiped out whole populations. They are still everywhere. I guarantee there's a bat near you, where you are now watching this video. I know that I have bats in this house, and they are wonderful neighbors. They do not interfere with anybody. If they cause the slightest bit of problems, I guarantee you the population of house sparrows that also live in this house would be raising a ruckus every day. I'd never hear the end of it. They'd be writing written complaints and petitions to me 24 hours a day if those bats were any problem. They aren't. They aren't any problem. I was a little bit worried because we had a brick chimney that ran the whole length of this house from the basement all the way to stuck out of the roof. And it was old. It was 150 years old. So that's trouble. You not only for the draft nightmare that causes for the building, but also just structure-wise. That can be dangerous. That can start to fall apart. So that had to go. That chimney had to go. That was a nightmare. An absolute nightmare. And in addition to it was a nightmare because of how much it inconvenienced me, of course, and everybody else. But it was also a nightmare because I knew that bats lived in there, and I knew that they would be just dispossessed. They wouldn't be. Right now we have those weatherized white plastic pipes instead for ventilation and heat release and whatnot. Bats can't live in those, so they very intentionally can't. They're designed so bats can't live in them. But there are plenty of places around here where bats can roost. And this is about that. This is about how bats are adapting to urban environments, which is the huge percentage of human environments on Earth. Bats are very adaptable. They learn quick, and they can get anywhere. And human environments are still full of insects. They're still full of larvae. They're still full of all the things that bats eat. They don't cause any trouble for humans at all. Not in the slightest. They would not attack you under any circumstances. You would have to bother them to be bitten by them. So if you have a bat reclamation project in your urban area, all they're going to do is eat pounds and pounds of bugs every night. You might want to, look into it. This is not. I'm finishing. This is the last thing on this disastrous Friday reads. I'm finishing up on a book that nobody's going to want to buy this. Nobody's going to want to read this. I am a big fan of the subject, so I have it, and I am going to pore over it in great detail, probably for half a year. Probably it'll be springtime before I'm fully done with this book. I'll be chasing down the references and seeing maybe authors whose style I like. Maybe I've never read anything by them. Do they have any papers that I can find in any databases? All that sort of stuff. I'm currently doing that with A View of Venice, a book that I got about a Renaissance print of the city of Venice that is so full. It is so full of Venice stuff that I'm going to spend months chasing that stuff down. I will probably do the same thing with this book. But anyway, Urban Bats wraps up this disastrous Friday reads in which I hated everything and everybody because everybody stinks. I will try to make next week's Friday reads a little happier. But I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, Book.